and welcome to our great introduction to Ron 101. And very excited to have two very distinguished panelists for us today. First of all, I would like to tell everyone that this is being recorded. Our first host, our first speaker I'd like to introduce is Elizabeth Blosser, who is Vice President of Government Affairs at the American Land Title Association. In this role, Elizabeth oversees the association's state legislative efforts. Blosser is engaged in a variety of industry initiatives, including digital closings and e-mortgages, as well as data privacy. She currently serves on the board of directors for the Property Records Industry Association. Thank you, Elizabeth, in advance for participating. Our second speaker is Nicole Booth. She serves as Executive Vice President of Public Affairs at Notarize, which is a digital identity platform with human assistance. She leads the organization's efforts to build and maintain trust and support among internal audiences, including government affairs, policy and industry relations, and community engagement. Prior to Notarize, Nicole worked at Quicken Loans and the Rock family of companies, K.L. Gates Public Policy and Law Practice in DC, and on Capitol Hill for former Ways and Means Chairman Dave Camp. So on behalf of MMBBA, we would like to introduce you to and appreciate your time helping us today. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. Really quick, we have a short amount of time and we have a lot of information to get through. So Elizabeth and I tried to keep the discussion high level. So we're going to go over three things today. First of all, we're going to give you a high level overview of the types of notary and how do you get a document signed, right? Because there are a lot of different acronyms out there. Then we're going to talk about the state of play of the remote online notarization laws. We saw a lot of movement and growth during the pandemic. And so we wanted to give you a lay of the land of where the rest of the country sits in addition to Maryland. And then the last thing is we're going to talk about some practical use cases at the digital closing table and things that hopefully can help you. All right, how to. So this chart is an amazing chart from the American Land Title Association. Full props to Elizabeth Blosser and letting me walk you through at least start. So there are a lot of acronyms out there. How do you get a document signed? So I'm going to try and quickly run through some of the traditional all the way through the electronic pieces. So I'm going to kind of go out of order here of this document because I think of it from in-person to completely digital. So the first is the traditional wet ink sign notarization, or we lovingly joke around about called the twin, where it's in person. You have your champagne at the digital or at the closing table. You have all wet signature, and you have paper documents, traditional, just like you've done for many, many years. Then you have a in-person electronic notarization, or an IPEN. And that's when you're in person still, but you're signing those documents electronically. Sometimes there's a hybrid along with it. We see that a lot in the real estate industry, where you have some paper documents that are wet signed and some documents that are electronically signed. We kind of put that in the IPEN category. And then you have the newest of the acronyms that came out through the pandemic is the remote ink signed or ink notarization, or the RIN. And what that is you have, you're on your computer. You can use a FaceTime or a Skype. There's no security involved. There's no credential analysis. And you're using paper documents. You have paper documents, you're wet signing, the notary is seeing you mail them, snail mail them back to the notary, who applies their wet signature and their wet seal. And then that document is signed. We have some thoughts about RIN that we'll share later, but I just want to make sure that you understand level set of what a RIN is, because it's the newest of the acronyms. And then kind of moving up, you have the remote online notarization with paper, or the PRON. And that is when you go through a multi-factor identity verification with a tech vendor like Notarize, or there are others out there. You're proving you're doing your identity, and then you're going online to to make sure that you can see the notary, but the documents are still paper. So you can still paper out that document, because we've seen in some counties that you need to paper out documents, some can't accept electronic. So we work with the county recorders as needed. And I'm sure Elizabeth will enlighten us more on that later. And then the last one is the remote online notarization, which now Maryland has, and we're very excited for. And so that is a completely digital experience. You're at your computer or tablet, the notary is at theirs. You go through a actually, you can go to the next page if you want. And I'll just quickly, I forgot. I'm sorry. So hold on one second. I'll finish this up. I thought we were going to the roadmap and I was going to walk through it. This is what happens when you do things live, my friends. So you have your remote online notarization where it's completely digital. Your digital signing table is the computer. Your notary's at the computer. You sign everything electronically. All the documents are electronic and they're uploaded into a portal or encrypted email. All right, Elizabeth, what did I miss here?
I just want to touch base a little bit more on remote ink notarization. Nobody would have thought at the beginning of 2020 that we were going to have a grid to help understand the various types of notarization happening, right? I mean, it's a lot going on out there, and remote ink notarization came about primarily through temporary executive orders in a few states, temporary legislation. And basically, what those orders and legislation do is waive the requirement for in-person appearance. And, the GSEs and others have made temporary allowances for the use of RIN during the pandemic. I think there is concern about, this being a type of notarization that's used going forward past the pandemic for the long term. As you can see from the grid, we've got the little thumbs down sign on the multi-factor authentication. And, one thing that we've said, continuously as an industry, both, title and lending, is that for any of these types of notarization, we want it to be safe for consumers and free of fraud. And the multi-factor authentication is a big part of that. And so I believe, Maryland has had a RIN executive order in place, but, just again, we don't see this as a long-term notary solution moving forward, primarily because of the lack of multi-factor, and also because it'd be very odd to have these two sort of wildly different standards out there in terms of what's required for a remote notarization. Something else to note on here is the eNote capability column. And so both IPEN, the in-person electronic notarization, as well as RON, can be part of an e-mortgage. We're obviously seeing more and more e-notes out there, which is pretty exciting. There's about 80 participants now in the MERS e-registry. In August, there were 45,418 e-notes registered with MERS, which was, an increase of over 5,000 from the previous month. They just keep seeing month-to-month increases. GSEs are reporting that, they're seeing more e-notes than ever. I came into this industry about 3.5 years ago, and I know that this e-mortgage process has been decades long, but I think we're finally there, and it's fun to kind of be part of crossing the finish line on a lot of this. Here's your slide, Nicole.
I was, now I'm not limp syncing, I mean, just in case you're wondering. So let's dig a little bit deeper, what's going on in Maryland. You have a remote online notarization, which we're really excited about. I know we submitted comments. I must have been last month, although my months are getting away from me. It might've been a couple months ago, but Maryland has remote online notarization. So what does that mean, right? So here's kind of the process, and we try to put it in 5 steps. One, you're uploading that document to your computer or device. If you're, working with a lender or you have a title company, sometimes they'll have their own portal. And from my past experience at QL, you had, my QL portal, all of your documents are already there. And then they would just work with the tech vendor to get them to the digital closing. Two, as a consumer, you're going to go through a multi-factor approach to prove your you. And for the first step, it'll be some kind of credential analysis. For Notarize, what we do is you take a picture of your phone, or you take a picture of your license with your phone front and back. We send it through a credential analysis. You go to our website, log in at the time that you set up with your notary, and then you'll then go through a series of knowledge-based authentication questions. You have to get 3 out of 5 right. If you get it wrong the first time, you get a second chance to do it. And if you get it wrong the second time, it boots you from the system. It doesn't mean you can't get to your closing. It doesn't mean that you can't sign your documents. It just means you can't do it through a remote online notarization. It's a fraud deterrent. So finally, the last piece is you're going to be connected for proving your identity. You're going to be connected over that live video heading into number 3, where you'll connect with the notary, who we look at as the last line of defense to prove you're you. You're going to check the audio video. You're going to, again, show your license. You're going to have a little back and forth. And then depending on what state you're in, you will have a recording of how long, it depends again on the state, of how long you need to have that session recorded. And then finally, you'll notarize your documents. Once you get 1 through 3, you finally get to notarize your documents, where there'll be a step-by-step approach where the notary will go through. We like it because it removes human error. You're going to have to go through each part of that document, or we'll let you move on. So then the notary will put their electric seal on it, and then you can save your docs instantly, whether it's through a cloud storage like a Dropbox or an encrypted email again, and then you can pop your champagne at the digital closing table. So that's a very high level overview of remote online notarization. Anything to add, Elizabeth?
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit on this slide, because I think it's important to note that what we're now calling traditional RON, and in the last 7 months, RON has become traditional. It's not, FaceTime or Skype. It's got sort of all of these standards built into place. You're going to have, a log on process that's going to require credentials. Once you log on, you do have to have identity verification. And obviously there's 3 ways to prove you are who you say you are: something you have, something you know, or something you are. So that would be credential analysis, would be your ID. That's something you have. Knowledge-based authentication questions like, where you've lived, the types of cars you've owned, things like that are things you know. And biometrics is data about you. And ironically, we use biometrics pretty much every day to do things like open our phones. But today in the RON world, it's primarily credential analysis and KBA, as Nicole mentioned. And I think it's important to talk about the fact that, the gold standard is multi-factor authentication, which means you need to check 2 of these 3 boxes, which is what RON does. Also, you need to have real-time continuous audio visual where everybody can see and hear each other. You're going to have those shared documents that everyone can see together that are, uploaded ahead of time. You're going to have people electronically signing, and then depending on the state, you're going to have the notary use an electronic stamp or certificate. And then another big fraud deterrent that's part of RON is an audio visual recording that's done of the notarial acknowledgement. And most states require that recording be kept for 7 to 10 years. So really another really big deterrent in terms of, most criminals do not want to get on camera and have a recording of them committing a crime. So definitely, these are sort of the standards and processes that have been kind of the hallmark of remote online notarization legislation. Nicole, anything to add here?
I mean, I think it's worth really hitting home that this is not Skype or FaceTime. The reason why we have remote online notarization is because of the safety and security measures that are the hallmark of the process. And so, having that identity verification, having that recording, again, like if we're thinking long-term and how does this impact the mortgage industry, you want those safety and security features around the product.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the state of play. Back to you, Nicole.
All right, so let's talk about what's going on across the country. So again, as you all know, Maryland has passed and gone through regulations. And if you haven't already seen tech vendors are being approved by the Secretary of State in Maryland. And right now, we've seen through the pandemic, without executive orders, we've seen 29 states with permanent remote online notarization. And the latest was Pennsylvania just a couple weeks ago. So your neighbor to the north, they are working through, it is automatically live due to an executive order that they had before, but to emergency order they had before, but they will be looking at regulation. So if you do, for instance, if any of you do regional work, just something for you to keep in mind. Obviously Virginia was one of the first states to pass remote, or was the first state to pass remote online notarization in 2012. So again, if you're looking at it regionally, your friends to the north and the south are hip to remote online notarization. Heading into next year, I think things that you're going to want to pay attention to if you do national work. There is a coalition getting together to work on California remote online notarization. There's movement in New York as well. We expect to see Oregon go permanent, and fingers crossed. Right now, North Carolina is a temporary as well. We're not exactly sure. I know that there have been discussions on making something permanent there. It might just take a little bit longer. And then hoping to see some more Northeast movement as well. Notarized is based in Boston. And so we're hoping to make some headway in Massachusetts as we move forward, and then kind of watching where New Hampshire, Connecticut, Maine land. So that's a really, really high level overview of where the state of play is right now.
So back in 2017, when we were first kind of talking about all this remote online notarization legislation as it came out, Alta put together principles for remote online notarization legislation, and it proved to be a really important exercise. These 8 principles have really been the hallmark of everything we've done, from the MBA Alta model legislation to what we did working with the Uniform Law Commission on RULONA 2018, which is what you all ultimately passed in your state. As you can see, safeguards, anti-fraud measures, things like that were primary. But what I want to talk about on this slide is the recordability piece. Obviously, there are still counties across the country that do not offer e-recording. And we felt it was really important that there be a process available for documents that had gone through the RON process to be recorded in the local land records. So there's this process known as papering out, where basically a notary can print off a copy and certify it for recording in the land records. Allowances for this are included in RULONA 2018, which you all passed. So something to keep in mind for those counties that may not offer e-recording or have it available for whatever reason. Additionally, here are the rest of our principles. As you can see, we've talked about the retention of records and the audio video recording. We thought tamper evident technology was going to be very important going forward. But one of the other key things from our industry's perspective was making sure there was an indication on the document of how the notary was done. And pretty much all states except for Virginia, which was the first to pass, have this in place, where when you look at a notarization, you can tell that it was done via RON. And that's helpful for multiple reasons. The one that I will highlight is we've been talking a lot about all of the safeguards and good things included with RON. So if there's ever a question about a notarization and you see that it was done via RON, to go look for that tamper evident technology, data, to go look for that audio video recording. So it really helps sort of put together a map for those types of things. Finally, we wanted to talk with you a little bit about practical use for this, especially as you guys are coming online. So Nicole, over to you to talk about consumer benefits.
So what we saw before the pandemic was that consumers were increasingly using digital devices. What we saw during the pandemic was the change from convenience to need. And so now the consumers expect that digital process. They expect some, if not all of it, to be part of it. They expect an a la carte service where if they want to do part of it in person or they want to do part of it digitally, they want to be able to there's a lot of sayings I'm using here, but choose your own adventure. And that applies to the financial services industry as well as closing a home. And so, when we're talking about what the consumer sees as their benefit, they're looking at that increased transparency, again, some kind of a la carte process that they can see exactly how their data and other items are being used throughout the process. Convenience in their signing experiences. Again, we talk about it as a digital closing table. So you still have the same experience as you would get in person, but you just don't have to be there. You can have your slippers on. Streamline processes. How fast is it going? Is it confusing? Are you using jargon? Is it easy to understand? They want complicated processes to be simple. And then obviously time savings. And I think that's something that, we've learned through the remote online notarization process is how much time are you able to save at that closing table by not having to set up a time, during the day between 9 and 4 at some random lawyer office or someplace where a notary has to be, or having a notary come into your home. You can do it from the safety of your home at 2 a.m. if you want. And so now the consumers are just really expecting these types of experiences because they get it in all aspects of their life.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Nicole, because I always like to have people think about the type of digital consumer that they are. I mean, I have my Starbucks app, where I can order my coffee ahead of time. Everybody is using, Amazon. There's these sort of tools that we've gotten so used to, and the pandemic has only made them more prevalent. And I don't foresee them going away. I think you're just going to see more and more sort of consumer, demand on this front. So we've been working a lot with title companies over the last couple of years to get ready for more digital closings. I can tell you that over 30% of Alta's membership is offering remote closings at this point, and that number just continues to grow and grow and grow. And as they've been preparing, we've talked a lot about the importance of setting goals, really looking at your company, your processes, your markets, and figuring out what is best for you to move forward, and really laying out those measurable goals that you can kind of go back and evaluate and see how you're doing on over the course of time. So here's just some examples of goals, things like, increased market share. We just talked about how consumers are looking more and more for these types of products. I will tell you, we have members who, they live and work in markets where RON works really well for them. For example, one is someplace where there's a lot of hospital systems, and they know that healthcare providers are really going to want to be able to access some of this remote closing options. And so they've done really well understanding their marketplace and what the demand is there. Obviously, there's the operational efficiency piece. I think we have to be realistic in saying that you probably have to get to a certain volume, maybe 20% to start realizing some of the operational efficiencies. But as with anything that's digital, you're going to see efficiencies from your employees. One of the nice things about digital, whether it's RON or IPIN, is cutting down on errors, or at least being able to quickly go back and find things that might be problematic. Obviously, over time, you're saving a lot of paper costs and things like that. We do have some members who have hit that 20% mark primarily through buyer and seller side transactions. And they're starting to really realize some of these cost savings and operational efficiencies. The other thing I would say, when you're converting to digital, what we found, and I think this is true on both the title and the lending side, is there's really no one size fits all approach to doing this. It really is taking a look at what your goals are, what your market looks like. You know, a lot of people have wanted to go straight remote online notarization because that works best for them. Others have said, let's do hybrid. Let's do just as many digital documents as we can and, you know, dip our toes in the water and see how this goes. A lot of people like iPen because they like the idea that people are still going to have that option for, you know, being in person at the closing table, but they're going to have a more streamlined process through digital documents. And, you know, obviously, again, with iPen and Ron, you've got, you know, the benefit of being able to produce e-notes. So just something to think about as you're moving forward. Once you've set your goals, there are a lot of conversations that you need to have. Communication is so key in this. A big piece is getting your team on board. I think this is a lot easier to do today than it was a year ago. You know, because I think everybody can see the incentive and sort of moving in this direction for, you know, operational efficiencies and for your customers. But you need to make sure that they're on board so that it's not easy to sort of go back to the default of how we've done it in the past. And I'm going to come back to find vendors, but I encourage you to really talk to your title company partners. I will tell you, I hear over and over again, we are ready for digital. We're doing it on cash transactions, but we're having a hard time finding lender partners. I keep joking that we need like a dating app for title and lending where you can find people who are, you know, doing Ron, iPen, hybrids, and you know, find ways to work together, but talk to your title companies and find out what are their goals, what are their timelines, and how can you make that align. And then it's important to also talk to your customers. You know, do they want the remote experience? Do they want the digital experience? If they want the remote experience, you know, do they have the technology to accommodate that and things of that nature? But you know, obviously one of the key pieces is finding a vendor and having those conversations. And so Nicole, you're kind of the expert in this area. What would you add on that?
I mean, really quick, because I know we're running short on time. There are 2 or 3 things I would really urge you all to consider as you're thinking about a vendor. You know, one, you're going to want to think about how does your technology plug into the vendor's technology, plugs into the title company's technology. So that's just something you're going to want to be thinking about as you're looking at a vendor. 2, you're going to want to be thinking about a vendor that has a compliance team that's able to follow the mismatch of all of the different state laws. You're going to want to make sure that they're paying attention to what's going on with the Secretary of State's office, that they're on top of it, because we don't have a uniform law across the country. So you're going to want to make sure that it works best for where you're doing business. And then the third piece is you're going to want tech that's built into you're going to want tech safety features that are already built into the process for your vendor. So for instance, you don't want people being able to bypass their KBAs. You want to make sure that they're able to go through, properly do the multi-factor identification, because that's your fraud deterrent. So, you know, those are the 3 very high level things to think about: the technology, compliance, and then tech by design pieces as you're looking for a vendor.
So once kind of those conversations have taken place, it's you know, your opportunity to put together your timeline and roadmap. It is much easier for title companies, I think, to make some of these changes, although it's important to have those conversations. If you just send a file over to the title company without conversations ahead of time, it's probably not going to go great. But you know, title companies have been able to sort of, you know, move quickly on implementation on some of this stuff. And I know there's a lot more that goes into the process on the lending side, but, you know, just general things to think about as you're putting together your timeline and thinking about these steps. You know, here are a few high level items. You know, obviously, you know, working with the GSEs, understanding where they're at, understanding insurability of these types of transactions in the various states, as Nicole pointed out. You know, the state laws vary to some degree and aren't implemented everywhere. It's a little bit confusing right now too, with all of the temporary legislation and executive orders, which are kind of all over the map. You know, checking on things like hardware and software needs, e-recording availability. I think the biggest thing on this slide is really the testing. What we have seen it, people who are the most successful in their rollouts are those who do a significant amount of testing on the front end with all the various partners, and then really having that communication feedback loop as you go along, whether it's with your employees, your vendor, your title partners, or your customers, just so that you can continue to improve and go back to how am I measuring up to these initial goals that I set. So it's a really exciting time. I know our members are really excited, and they're excited to work with you as you move forward in this space as well. And then I don't know if we have a minute or two for questions at this point, but otherwise we are available via email. You've got our contact information. You can get through Amanda.
You can find us.
If anybody does have a question, you just have to unmute yourself because everybody's muted right now.
I wanted to thank Elizabeth for getting up early and Nicole for your time. It's been very helpful. And my main question would be, are you finding the realtor partners open to this method as well? Just because a lot of times, as we know, the realtor community controls the title a lot. What's your thoughts on that and the feedback from realtors?
But would you want to start, Elizabeth?
Yeah, so lots of positive feedback from realtors. I would say, realtors think about a couple of things, right? They don't want a transaction to go bad for their customers, right? So like new things can, create some concern, but as they get started in this process, they're really liking it. For RONs, most platforms allow for multiple people to be participating, so they can still participate the way that they always have. The transactions when you're digital tend to go faster, which is something that they like as well. And so in talking to NAR and a lot of state associations, super positive feedback. But another group, as you say, to have some conversations with and really make sure their comfort level is good. A lot of our title partners set up seminars just for realtors to walk them through this process and make sure that they're getting to that comfort level.
I was going to say the only thing that I could even add would be, again, from the national perspective, the National Association of Realtors has been very positive. We've had great conversations. I know other tech vendors have as well. They've had many demos. They understand how we work. So from a national perspective, we've seen it a little bit of top down into the grassroots area.
Great, thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for the question. I love this awkward silence. Questions.
I have a question, actually. This is Sean Williams.
Oh, go ahead.
So we're mortgage brokers, and I know that obviously the RON's available for most of the nation, right? We find that some of our lenders do RON, others won't. What is generally the restriction behind them doing it when we know we're in a state that allows it? Like, what have you found?
Do you want to go? Do you want me to start?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of it is the amount of processes that need to go into having this change happen on the lending side, whether it's through the GSEs and internal things. We're at 29 states with permanent legislation. I would say we're getting really close to that critical mass, right? But quite a few of those states have been this year, and so I think people have been kind of waiting. I really want to see legislation in California and New York. I think that will really drive wider adoption and really be incentive for lenders to go ahead and make those process and system changes that they need to.
I agree. It's really been regionally, right? So as you've seen the states kind of regionally move things, Washington, Oregon kind of moved, the center of the country moved. You saw kind of the Midwest with the Michigan, Ohio. And so as the states are passing laws, that'll tell you what lenders are more comfortable with it, of how long the law has been passed. Lenders that have just starting engaging in remote online notarization during the pandemic. Our first of all, it was good because it was we were getting to that critical mass because you could see the practical use of how it could be done and how quickly it could get up to scale. So that was a good thing. But then it was also like, okay, there are some roadblocks. So how do we get past those roadblocks from an industry standpoint? So I like Elizabeth believe that things will start to progress as it's a more regular top of mind thing versus a nice to have kind of going forward, especially into 2021.
Got it. And then part two of the question is for on the title side, where have you found some of their challenges have been? Because there's been some where it's like, hey guys, let's do this, Ron. It's amazing. It makes things a lot better for everyone. We can move a lot faster too as well. But I found that I've gotten pushback from some of the title companies where they're like, yeah, we could do it, but we just rather send a notary out, or we can do a social distancing closing, that kind of thing. So where have you found there to be some challenges with title companies like ultimately adopting this?
Well, I think that you're going to see, like I said, over 30% of our members are utilizing the technology, and that continues to grow. And our industry is at a place where they're saying, how can we do this more? So I think you'll see that more and more, where there's been hiccups, it's been with maybe the signers that are involved and concerned about maybe technology capabilities or things like that, timeframes involved. But I think that, in large part, our industry is ready to move forward on this. So hopefully as time goes by, you're going to be hearing lots more yeses. But again, those conversations have to happen ahead of time. I mean, I have heard from our members, hey, we had this opportunity, but we had no time to test and no time to prep ahead of time. And we didn't want to look bad in front of the client or the other party. So I think the timing and the communication steps are also just a really big part of that.
Yeah, I don't have
thank you
to add except, again, going back to that technology piece, you're getting a lot of technology to plug and play. And so there isn't like a uniform, depending on the technology vendor you're using versus the title company versus the lender, you're getting 3 technology pieces to plug and play together. So, we're trying to do our best from our tech vendor side to get that up and running as fast as possible. But I think what we learned during, before the pandemic is we all knew about remote online notarization as an industry, but maybe the consumer didn't know it was an option. And I kind of equated to, before the pandemic, I knew I could get my groceries delivered. I could go to an app and have them delivered. During the pandemic, I needed to have my groceries delivered. And so I was using those digital services. Now, post-pandemic, I know it's available and I probably won't go back into the grocery, or not post-pandemic or whatever we are in this 2.0 pandemic. I probably won't be going back to the grocery store. I kind of look at remote online notarization the same way. Like maybe you kind of knew about it before, but now you definitely know about it. And so now your mindset has changed in a different direction. Probably more info than you wanted, but there you go.
These are great questions.
Yeah, getting your money's worth out of this webinar.
Yeah, that wasn't too much information. Thank you.
So as from the title company side, so like we've signed up with a vendor and we have all that, but it's kind of like you were saying, you almost need a dating app for the lenders and the title companies. Like, so we can say, yeah, we're ready, but then it almost seems like when we say like, we're ready to go, but we don't have a title or like a lender that is ready to work with us to try it. So like, how do we move forward to the next step? Like we have the vendor, we have, we're ready to do all this, but it's like, what's now? Like, what do we do now?
You've got to have those conversations and reach out and kind of see where people's timelines are. I will tell you from a national perspective, Alta and MBA are working feverishly to figure out the best ways to create networking opportunities to try and make sure that everybody has the opportunity to sort of connect with people who are interested it is so vital that we move forward together on this title and lending. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be things that we run into, and we need to make sure we don't have siloed solutions, that we are working together on this. And so staying as close as possible on the national level, on the state level, and the local level is going to be really key to making sure that, sort of widespread adoption happens in the smoothest way possible, which is going to be a benefit to us all. But I'm gonna work on that dating app.
Yeah. I mean, listen to Elizabeth, of course, but I have to say, from a tech vendor standpoint, like, we are doing demos like crazy. So if you want to do an education piece with a handful of lenders that you're talking to, or you take your vendor with you, I hope it's notarized. It might not be, and that's okay. But I can, I know that the tech vendor space is, hungry to get out there and help. So if you want to have them do demos, I suggest that.
Okay.
Once people
awesome.
see it, like, I feel like their whole mind changes around it.
Right. We also are told that like the lenders won't accept when they won't do it.
Oh. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
And so sometimes like we'll hear from our lender partners that they won't accept an e-note, or they're not accepting e-signatures on their docs. So then we're kind of like, oh, okay, well, we signed up for all of this, but we're not sure what to do with it.
I think what's encouraging is those MERS e-registry participant lists, and the fact that it is growing so dramatically, and you're seeing more and more e-notes and sort of, conversion of processes. So I would say, way to be an early adopter, and this is going to benefit you in the long run.
Okay, thank you.
Do you guys mind providing the PowerPoint so I can share it with the recording?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that'd be great. All right, any other questions?
I apologize. I have one more question. This is Sean Williams again. Are you guys available to do any other webinars for us outside of this? Like, if we wanted to invite partners or whatnot, would you be available to do this presentation again?
Yes. I mean, I don't want to speak for Elizabeth, but we like to travel the country together. We used to. Now we have to do it virtually.
We love having our show on the road. Happy to help.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. So should I get your contact information from Amanda?
Yep.
Okay, thanks again.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. We will post this on the website. And I will, maybe I'll just shoot out the presentation with your guys' contact information to the folks that came in case there are any other follow-up questions.
That's great.
Okay.
We're being
Thank
yanked again,
you.
Elizabeth. Thank you.